again. Berlin is a very special city to photograph. Its streets are steeped in the history of many centuries of struggle and hardship and revival. One thing I've learned throughout all the many years that I've lived here in Berlin is that whenever I walk through those streets, I'm accompanied by a certain sentiment of Berliners who are survivors. Berlin is a city of bright colours and darkly clothed figures. In winter, summer and any other time of the year, its residents dress down rather than go brightly along the narrow streets of Berlin. Whenever I am out in Berlin city taking photos, doing street photography, I'm accompanied by the awareness of Berlin's history, and I've lived some of that history. It is a city that had its dictators, bred Kaisers and soldier kings, the Third Reich, the Berlin Wall, and yet it has always survived. Its residents are always finding a way to see into the future and reunite to build a new Berlin. The mayor, Wowereit, once said, "Berlin is sexy but poor." These days, Berlin is still sexy, but no longer so poor. It's become a mecca for business and, as always, a home for artists and creative people to gather and work. It's a vibrant, creative and inspiring place that takes you in hand and keeps you here. Once here, you've always got a suitcase in Berlin, as we say. Even when you leave, you haven't really left. And I remember long ago when I was a British soldier, we could visit East Berlin with a pass. We'd have to go through Checkpoint Charlie. And one day several of us went down to Checkpoint Charlie, made our way through the officialdom of East German paperwork, the well-practiced blank and unfriendly faces of East German border guards, and we emerged on the other side of the barriers at Checkpoint Charlie, stood in Friedrichstraße and looked around the street, and people were milling about and heading off into East Berlin city. And although we were still in Berlin, it was now communist Berlin, and we needed to be careful and watch our step. But just 50 metres away on a corner, we saw 3 men dressed in long leather coats, hands pushed deep into their pockets and their leather trilby hats tipped over the brows. And yeah, believe you me, they were looking like Gestapo. These guys were Stasi. And they had decided that our little group of British soldiers needed to be kept watched. And they followed us constantly, not trying to hide, but plainly tagging along behind us along the street. Everywhere we went, we headed down to Alexanderplatz. We mucked about a bit, and occasionally, with a good bit of British humour, we turned around and waved at them. After a short while, we realised that that didn't entertain them, and we better just keep quiet. Taking photos back then was not advised at all, not even at the border from the West. Tourists did it, but it wasn't a good idea, as we discovered. Unfortunately, some photographers, tourists and even an American military officer, local people also, who were taking photos from the west to the east, from certain points along the border, as they were taking shots, the goon squad up in the towers saw them and shot them dead, and it's very sad. They were shot dead on the spot, and it was because it was a time of shoot-to-kill East German policy. The West German government demanded that the East German government, under Erich Honecker, declare which policies are in force at any time. The shoot-to-kill or shoot-to-wound policies changed occasionally, and the East Germans didn't find it necessary to inform the West about these changes. It's sad, but it's the history of this city, Berlin. The streets of Berlin are steeped in history that is unique. There's nothing dry and boring about the KGB or the border guards, or who we British soldiers always referred to as the goon squad in the towers. As history rolls along in its merry way with changing politics, the madness of crowds and a social upheaval, Berliners keep going. They reinvent themselves in a way that comes from a hardiness that is Berlin pure. It's the pumping heart of Berlin. An example of history is, of course, we know much history about the Germans, but Frederick the Great, the soldier king, he lived in tough times and built the already powerful Prussian army into an even more formidable fighting force. Yet he knew a society where its residents were educated would be a society that flourished, and he introduced access to libraries and education to Berliners. These days you can stroll through the streets, dodging in and out of what was once a forbidden zone, the east side of Berlin city, a place that was ruled by Erich Honecker, controlled by the Stasi agents dressed in their black leather coats and trilbies, and if they took you in, you were already condemned. But you know, as we street photographers live in our cities, I always remember the history of this one, and looking for the light and shadows in Berlin is easy these days. The new glass buildings along Friedrichstraße, the broad avenues of Frankfurter Allee, or the tight spots around Hackescher Markt all offer excellent places to visit and photograph with no fear of reprimand. Thanks for listening. I'm Sean Durham again. It's my channel. It's about street photography, but you know, street photography is also, it's reflecting where you live very much. There's art in it, there's creativity, but we must never forget the city we live in is steeped in history. It wouldn't matter if you were in Vancouver, New York, Los Angeles, Berlin or Paris, or maybe even London, if you can afford it. But the wonderful thing about it is when you delve in a little bit deeper into what it is you're looking at, you begin to understand it more, and you get that vibe, those vibrations that come up from the past. Because all those streets that you burn leather on, they are full of history that goes back hundreds of years. So I hope you have a nice week ahead. I think it's Monday. It is indeed. Yeah. And I hope you enjoy this little video. Bye-bye.